Well, I got the picture.
Hey guys, this is Press Any Button. Here we are with the next part of our rail shooter series, and today we're going to be implementing a timer. This is going to be counting down as our player is moving through the game. It's going to give them a sense of rush in a way. It's just going to be something that's going to light a fire behind them and motivate them to move through the action sequences in our game at the fastest pace they possibly can. The reason why we want to do this is because a lot of our enemies are going to do fake shots, so it's going to take them a couple of seconds to actually get accurate with their hits. That's something we're going to talk about in a later part, and we don't want our player to just be bored and be like, wow, everyone's got stormtrooper aim, why should I even bother playing this game quickly when I can just go through it methodically. In fact, why go through it methodically when I can just not play it at all? And that's not what we want. So how are we going to implement this timer? Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a game controller. So a game controller is going to host all of those components that we can't quite interact with. So for example, if I assigned my timer to an enemy game object and I destroyed that game object, then that timer would go with that enemy game object, and we don't want that to happen. So we want something just to be sitting in the back, dealing with all of our systems and everything like that. So far we have a UI canvas, and that's pretty good, but we want something just to host things and not worry about any interaction. So we're going to go one step above the UI canvas, and we're going to create a game controller. To do this, all you're going to need is an empty game object. So you right click, create empty, and then you're going to edit the name over in the inspector here. Now if I unveil this, you can see that I've got my canvas, and under my canvas I have all of my UI assets. To do that, all you need to do is take your canvas and drag it on top of your game controller, and it'll be a child of that game object. The next thing we can do is we can go over to canvas and right click on it, and then go to UI and text. This is where we get to add new text. You can see in the game view that I have that text, and if I switch to 2D here, click on the canvas, hit F, then I can find where my text is. Obviously I have this text, but let's see how we can actually manipulate our text. So you see that new text matches up with new text where it says text. I'm saying text a lot, and so we want to make that a number. So this is going to be a placeholder, because as soon as we implement our script, it's going to count down with that amount of figures. So say we have a countdown starting from 30, we're going to have 30.0. And so this gives us a good idea of just the size of this component. Now, as for fonts, what you'll have to do is you'll have to go into your folders, find any font that you want to use and drag it into your assets folder. It's just the same as how we implemented our UI component earlier. You just got to do a little bit of folder management. It's especially easy if you've just downloaded a new font. So I have a couple of downloaded fonts, and so I was able to just get them into my project nice and easy. When you want to use that font, you'll find it in your assets folder, and I find a good method to getting that font working is just to drag it over into this box where it says font, and there you have your font. If we zoom in, we can see that it's taken the form that we want it to take. Next thing we can do is we can increase the size of the font there, so I'm going to set it to 50. Note that if you set it to a size and your text disappears, you'll just have to increase the size of the box surrounding it, so it's not been deleted and it's not become too big that you can't see it. It's just that it's overlapping and coming out of the box, so you just want to work your way around that. Then there's line spacing, and there's wrapping, and there's color, and all these things, and these are things that you can easily mess around with. But when you've got your text there, you just want to drag it up to the point where you need it. I drop my text there, and we're pretty much good to go in terms of that. Okay, so I've just deleted that new text that I created, seeing as I've already got text that's working and I don't want to break my game. We have a new script that we're going to work on, and this is called timer. You go over to your game controller, you hit add component, you make a new script. You could call this timer, and we're going to go into Visual Studio and see how this script works. Okay, so starting off with our timer script, you're going to make a reference that you are using unityengine.ui. That's really important, otherwise we won't be able to make any references to our text, and this will be completely useless to us. So continuing on from there, we have public float time start. This is going to be the amount of time that we have at the beginning of the game. It's also going to be what we refer to when we want to add a little bit of extra time, which is something you would have seen in the demonstration. So time start runs throughout the entire thing, but for our purposes so far, it's just going to dictate the amount of time we have at the beginning. And then we have that public text, which is timer text. This is so that we can make a reference to our text that we actually want to manipulate. Now in void start, we have timer text.text equals time start. We have that reference to that text that we have in our UI already, and we make that text equal time start. And then we dictate the amount of decimal points that we want. We set it to F2, so we're going to have 2 decimal points. So we go over to void update, and in the start time, we minus time delta time. So each second, we take off a second of time, and that's going to count down throughout our game. So that's why we're doing it in void update. And while that's happening, our text will still equal the start time text. So our start time text is going to be manipulated, and therefore our text that we've got a reference for is going to be manipulated. They are linked, they pretty much become one in the same. And we're just saying, look, we're going to count down, and as this countdown happens, we're going to display this text, which is exactly the number that we have from the script in our inspector slapped onto our UI canvas. Okay, once you've gone that far, you'll want to save your script and return to Unity. And now in Unity, we can test out our script, but the first thing we want to do is go over to that game controller, and you're going to drag your text into where it says timer text, and you can choose what your start time is going to be. I'm going to make mine a minute, so 60 seconds, and we'll see how this plays out. And here we can see that our text is running down as we'd have it. So as the game continues, we count down each second. It's nice to have 2 decimal points there, just because it gives a bit more of a rush to the sense of time that we have as those numbers tick down really quickly, and then we see those seconds go down. All right, let's continue. Honestly, you could finish there and say, you know, you've done a pretty good job. However, that's not how we do things around here. So how are we going to make it so that we can interact with this timer here, so that we can give our players a little bit of hope, just so we can snatch it from them later? Well, we're going to create some game objects that if we destroy them, then we will have more time added to our timer. The thought process is very simple. We're going to raycast onto an object and destroy it. When that object registers that it's taken damage, it's going to 1, be destroyed, and 2, it's going to reference the timer script under the game controller to add a particular amount of seconds to the timer. So the first thing we want to do is create those icons. All we got to do is right click, create a 3D game object. You can choose pretty much any of these. I really do suggest actually just only the first 4. So I've gone for a capsule here just because it looks different from our enemies, so we won't get confused. Obviously these are just placeholders for now, but they give us a pretty good idea of what we're going to be doing. Once you've got that, you can leave all its settings. It's already got a collider. We're not going to add a rigid body to it because we're not using that. But what we are going to add to it is a new script. Once you have your new script there, call it timer boost and open it up in Visual Studio. So let's take a look at this timer boost script. So we start off with a public int, which is our starting health, and our current health. So this very much plays out like our enemy health script. So these are things we're going to be very familiar with. Then we got this public integer, which is the amount of time that we want to add to the timer when this game object is destroyed. And we've got a public game object, which is controller, which we're going to drag into the inspector for our game object. Then we have timer, timer up. So this is the reference to the timer script, and we reference it by making sure that we have the name exactly correct. We say timer, and then we give it a nickname that we can use in the script. So void awake, we're going to have that current health equal that starting health, and we're going to get a reference to the timer script. And then we have a public void take damage, just as we had in our enemy health script, which says that we subtract the int amount from our current health. We are only going to have 1 on this item. So after 1 shot, our current health will equal or be less than 0 in case we double tap it or something. And we're going to destroy this game object. But not only are we going to destroy the game object, we're going to reference that timer script. We're going to go timer.addTime timer amount. And then if we go back to our timer script, we can see what we're actually talking about. So we have another public void, and this is add time. And this is very simple. We just say time start plus the amount. Time start runs throughout the game. So at some point it's going to be 20, at some point it's going to be 10. But if we add our amount to it, which is 10, then it'll go back up to 20. Now the only thing left is to go to our firing script and make sure that we can actually fire on this game object. So we have a reference here, call it timer boost, so just the name of this script exactly as it is, and then we give it that little nickname, equals hit.transform.getComponent, just as we did before. And this time we're using the same functionality of take damage, so it's pretty straightforward. We just got to switch the names around. So if timer boost script doesn't return as null, so if we do find this script on this game object, then we're going to access that take damage. So just to make it really clear, this is the chain of events. We recognize that this script exists, and if we hit a game object with this script, we're going to access take damage. When we access take damage, we're not only going to take damage from our game object and destroy it, but we are also going to access the timer up function. And that timer up function is referenced there, and we can follow it through to that public void, and it says start time. We're going to add the amount of time to our start time. And I hope I've made that as simple and clear as possible. It took a little bit to figure it all out, but if we return to Unity after saving our script, we can play around and see how it goes. Okay, when you go over to your timer boost game object, you're going to want to drag the game controller into there. You are able to manipulate the timer amount that you want, so I've set mine to 10, and you're able to manipulate the starting health. Don't mess around with the current health, otherwise that will cause some complication. We need the health of this game object to hit 0 so that we can actually add time, and if we test it out, then we can see some wonderful results. Alright, so I'm just going to get rid of our enemies real quick. I often lag while recording. And we haven't assigned a particular script to our capsule, that's why you see our icon go back to our mouse pointer. But if I click on this, then our time goes up. Click on that, time goes up. Click on that, time goes up. And that is it, guys. The only thing that we have left to do is just to make sure that we have that script that deals with our cursor assigned to these game objects. So we're going to go take that reticle script, drag it over the capsule. I'm just going to put it on 1 because I don't need to put it on all of them, and we're going to use that icon, so the ready icon. And there we have it. It added a little bit back to our timer. The only thing that we have to worry about now is just changing the appearance of our cursor one more time. Instead of having our cursor mode to auto, we gotta have it as forced software. Anyway guys, that has been another press any button tutorial. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope you can use some of the techniques that we've come across in this part in your own individual projects. But until next time guys, press on and keep creating.